this has to be constipation.
yeah.
And this is so annoying. If I could just go to the bathroom and get rid of this gas needs to go away. It's really bothering me. Like, so I go to the bathroom, I squat, and I'm just kind of trying to push. And there's no, like, the signs that we were told in our course, mucus plug, water breaking. There was none of that. And it must have happened while I was in the toilet there, because I didn't feel like it was there very long. And then suddenly, bloop, and I was like, wait a minute. Then I knew, no, something happened. And I put my hand and I could feel hair. And I was just like,
What?
oh shit. And I stepped from the toilet and I look, and yes, it's bloody. And I said, oh, that's my mucus plug. But it didn't appear before, and there was no water breaking, and there was none of the signs that I was told to look for. So I go to my husband and I say, I didn't want to alarm him, because I was like in my head, I'm like, oh, I messed up. I had no idea I was in labor. So I told him, can you look between my legs? I feel something. And then he goes, oh my God, it's a head. Oh my God. No. Oh my God, I see hair. And I was like, yeah, that's what I thought.
Welcome to Mom Strength, a podcast and movement to empower, educate, and showcase mom strength inside and out. I'm your host, SURABHI Veech, physiotherapist and fitness coach, also known as the Passionate Physio. Join me for discussions on movement, mindset, and motherhood, where we raise the bar and challenge the status quo. Get ready for expert interviews and real, honest conversations where we explore physical, mental, and emotional health. Let's celebrate the beautiful diversity and common experiences in all of our journeys. Let's do this. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mom Strength. I'm your host, SURABHI Veech, and I'm really excited to have on my guest, Sarah Syed, today. And listen, this is really cool connection. We met on Instagram. She's one of my quote unquote followers, one of my online friends. And we just have had numerous conversations where we've really connected. And she shared a little bit about her birth story. And I'm like, I need to have you on my podcast because she's got an exceptional birth story, which isn't as commonly heard. Or maybe it is in the movies, but we don't know many people who've had these experiences. And I really want to hear about her perspective on how it was and how her journey has been. So briefly, Sarah is a portraiture artist, a mom with ADHD, formerly an orthotic or prosthetic technician who recently completed a master's in rehabilitation studies, but left healthcare. Currently a fingerprint technician and still working on your, I love it. You're like, I'm still working on my bio. We're all a work in progress. And I love this. And you have a account and a company, I believe, called Drawmatic.
Yeah, I also do portraiture for people, and I draw, and I do it both on a teaching capacity and for parents and people. Yeah, exactly.
Very cool. I want to dig into that. I want to take a look at your work because so Sarah shared a picture of her with her son for Halloween, and he's got this epic costumes. Like this is like, when you see a mom with her family with their like epic costumes, like, and you kind of feel like, oh, that's amazing, but I could never do that because I have zero creativity in that aspect, but I'm always in awe of other people who do. And I think that should be celebrated.
Thank you.
Okay. So let me know a little bit about you. Tell me about yourself, what you're at, where you live, what you do.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I really do enjoy your podcast. I have been listening to it, and it's so cool to connect in person finally, or on Zoom person.
On Zoom person, yeah. Awesome. So tell me about how old's your kiddo?
My kiddo is 4 now.
4. Wow.
Yeah.
He's tall for 4, isn't he?
People think he's much older.
I thought he was like 6 based on the picture
you
sent.
Yeah.
Because my daughter is 4.5, and he looks a lot taller. But that, again, genetics, and every kid's different. Every person's different, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about your birth story.
So my birth story, I was living in Toronto at the time. We recently moved to Ottawa because I started a new job. But in Toronto, we're in a one bedroom, the typical Toronto lifestyle,
Yeah.
condo life, not condo, apartment life, but construction constantly.
Yes.
And I had always wanted to see a midwife, so I went to see a midwife. And now my parents were an immigrant family from Egypt, and they're not very familiar with midwives, so they were
Mm.
horrified. They honestly thought I was going to the village to give birth in the woods or something. And I kept telling them, no, no, I'm low risk, and it's a healthcare professional, and don't worry. And I've known since I was 14 that I wanted to go with a midwife
That's incredible.
for my care. And I was really happy that I was able to find one. And it's funny because I realized, like, when I told my doctor, like, oh yes, I'm pregnant. Oh great, I know all these OBGYN. I'm like, oh no, no, I want to see midwife. Oh, like I was like, what? Like, why are you going like that? Okay, so like
Hmm.
I was on my own to find a midwife. I called a few clinics and I was very lucky. I was with Kensington Midwives, and
Hey, I was too with my first birth. No
oh
way.
great, yeah.
Who
And
did
it's
you
a team.
have?
Um, everything is a blur right now, but I just love them. Like it's a teaching clinic, so they also have students, but the way they had it is there was teams of 3 midwives and they'd be on rotation. So what's cool is like you get to have your baby delivered by one of the midwives you see, which you wouldn't get with an OBGYN. So I was like, oh, it's nice, it's familiar. And what stood out to me is the student was male, which is not common
Oh, I didn't know
in
that. Yeah.
midwifery.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they asked me, are you comfortable with the meal? Are you sure it's okay? And I'm like, wow, if it was an OBGYN, no one would ask, and so I like appreciate that. I had no problem with it, but I was like, it's nice that there's all this. I always feel very empowered. Like they're very much like, what are you comfortable with? What are you not
Yes.
comfortable with? I really like that about their care. So when I went with that, my parents there are a lot of doctors in our community, Egyptian community, and I think a close friend of my dad's an OBGYN, and he goes, oh no, you can't do this, or so
Mm.
I know all these awful cases, and was trying to like scare me. And I'm like, no,
Dissuade
no.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, no, I know what I'm doing. And then they're like, and then even my doctor was kind of like, well, where are you giving birth? I said, oh, I would rather give birth in the hospital, big time, because I live in a 1 bedroom. It's cramped. We have stuff everywhere. It's not very organized. I'm kind of
I totally hear
embarrassed.
you.
So
Don't
I
be
was like, I
embarrassed. I think
don't.
honestly, people who don't live in the city don't get how expensive it is to live in the city. If I lived outside in the middle of nowhere, I could afford a mansion. But like we're in
Yeah.
a 2 bedroom
Yeah.
condo because it's like it's all we can afford. And like this is all the space that we actually need. But
And I
I
love
hear
it for
you.
that.
It's cramped.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
cramped and you don't have a lot of space to like set up a beautiful baby nursery and
Hmm.
everything.
No
So
space for a tub, no space for. So I made it clear to the team, I'm like, okay, I'd like to have the birth in the hospital. And they said, well, there's also the birth center. And
yes.
and they were telling me like, there's less germs at home. It's more sterile. They're trying to kind of, and I said, no, no, it's okay. I'll have it. I'll have it at home.
At
That
the
was my
hospital.
plan. Like I absolutely did not want a home birth. Not that I have anything against it, but I was like, I absolutely want it at the hospital.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we worked that out. And I mean, my family doctor was like, well, it's good to do some things that are based on evidence, medical
Evidence.
research. And I was like, excuse me, you guys are supposed to be like a team that refer to each other. It's not supposed to be a competition. And family doctors are qualified to deliver babies. So a midwife does that only as their job. So I'm more comfortable with a midwife. Again, whatever anyone's comfortable with, I have
Yeah.
no opinion, but I felt like I was a little bit like not shamed, but a little bit like, why are you doing something a little different? But
Yeah.
I was surprised. I didn't, that kind of pulled me about because I don't know, I'm very familiar with midwives since I was 14. I was researching them and I'm like, yeah, that's what I want when I
Also,
have a
I'm like
baby.
impressed that you were 14. That's definitely well ahead of the game compared to most people who are only after they're getting pregnant learning about these options. And I had a very similar experience with my first. Was your son was born 2018?
Yes, that's correct.
This
Yep.
is wild. What month?
In April.
Okay, mine was born in May. So we very well could have been in the clinic at the same time because I was with
Wow.
Kensington Midwives too, and I loved them. And with my first birth, with my second, I was with North Don River because we had moved. But my family doctor, when I told her I was pregnant, she was immediately like, oh, this is the best OB in Toronto, Mount Sinai Hospital. And I'm like, I'm thinking, do I need a high risk? Like, am I high risk? Like, why do I need the best OB? Like, I'm just having a baby. And
Right.
like, I don't want to be cut open for no reason, in which case, then yeah, I would want the best surgeon, I guess. But, all things known, I was low risk. but then she was like, well, my cousin is a midwife, but if it was my choice, I would go with an OB. And I'm like, I'm not here to ask you about your choices.
Yeah, I respect your choice.
I respect your choice, but like, I'm telling you, I want a midwife. I know what I want. And I did feel like I was shamed for it or like looked down on. And luckily my family was so, they just trusted me because they didn't know anything about the Canadian healthcare system in terms of birth. And they trusted that like I would have done all the research, but all of my friends were like shocked too. Right. They were like, oh, you're going with a midwife, because they had, the ones that I had already had babies had gone with an OB in a hospital. So I think they felt like I thought it was better because I was choosing a different option. I'm like, this has nothing to do with you or anyone else.
No, it's very
personal. Right. And so thank you for bringing that up. And I love that you went with you trusted yourself. And for anyone listening, this is the power of having the confidence to trust yourself and your decisions, and instead of listening to every single person, even if they're a well-educated family member who is an OBGYN themselves, very valid that that's research-based. However, we know that the history of midwifery existed long before OBGYNs. People were having births long before it was medicalized. And, we need to trust too that birth is a normal biological process. And in most cases, it's not an extreme medicalized measure. So,
exactly.
Okay. So let's hear what happened. You wanted a hospital birth. Everything was going smoothly in your pregnancy or any complications? Nothing?
I don't want to say I had a very easy pregnancy, but everything was very straightforward. I had a physical job, orthotic technician. I'm in a lab. Yeah. I'm lifting, moving things. I'm on my feet all time, all day. And I had no problem. Like, it was to the point where there's casts, there's stuff, supplies being in, and my boss would be like, oh, I'll lift them. I'll get someone to help you. And I was like, nah. And I did everything. And every time come, why did you do it? I'm like, because it's fine. And also I can't wait like an hour for
I'm not just sitting here waiting around for someone else to do it.
No. And I was also exercising very regularly, squats, lunges, everything. I've always been active.
I've seen your pull-ups.
Thank you. We did not own a car. And so, and that was the only concern with my Kensington midwife. We lived really close to Sunnybrook Hospital, but they only had admitting privileges at St. Joseph. And I remember thinking, oh man, it's an hour, 17 minutes, probably an hour and a half, and I have to take the subway, the bus, the tram. I'm like, wow, that's going to be a pain when I'm pregnant. And the lady, my midwife, is like, Sarah, you can take a taxi. It's a special occasion. You don't have to always take transit. And it hadn't even occurred to me that was an option. I was like, oh yeah, I suppose like.
Although in rush hour, you might be faster taking the TTC than the transit than a cab, right?
Yeah, for people outside of Toronto traffic is like, it takes 2 hours to leave the city. It's nuts. Yeah. And that could be like the middle of the afternoon on, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't have to be like only before and after work. It's all day until like 8 p.m. right?
Yeah. So I'm seeing my midwives. We're getting closer to the due date. I feel fine. I'm fairly active on my feet all the time at work. No issues exercising, but by the end of I did feel a little more tired as we got towards the due date. So I did my exercise 1 day a week, but because I don't have a car, I'm naturally walking everywhere and I'm working on my feet. I worked up until less than a week before my due date. It was maybe the week of my due date. That's when I stopped, but I kept working up until the end. Against my husband's like, well, you should take it off. I'm like, it's fine. So I'm gonna keep working. And it did happen that we did buy a car a week before the due date. So we did have a vehicle, but it wasn't something that I could anticipate early on.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay, well that means that I can get a ride to the hospital. That's great. One less thing to worry about.
Was your husband working from home at the time?
No, he's an architect, and this was before the pandemic, and so he worked very long days at the office. So architects have quite intensive schedules. So especially before a deadline, he'd be working like late into the hours. So he had long days at work. And so I was fortunate he was around when things went down. So I'll detail it from the day, and if you have any questions, let me know. But it was the exact due date of my son's due date was April 12th. So it was April 12th. I'm exactly like cooked, I guess fully cooked. So I go to my appointment, have an appointment with my midwife. She does the exam and she says, no, there's no sign of this baby coming. It's sitting up. it's actually it's a back baby too. Like it was a sunny side up baby.
Yes.
And she's like, oh, that labor might be painful, but don't worry. Sometimes it turns around, we'll monitor you and we'll let you know how things go. And I was a little nervous because I was like, oh no, it's not perfect. Like, I don't want to use the word perfect, but it's not the way
ideal.
I was.
Yeah.
It's not ideal. It's a painful labor, but I was like, okay,
that was like
I'm
my
mentally
daughter.
prepared.
She was sunny side up.
Oh, well, that's tough. Like,
Yep. I
so
tried to turn her, and I did partially. So she was kind of sideways, but after having my second, I realized what a different labor it is when it's not a back labor.
yeah.
Back labor is a lot harder, but and for those who are listening who's like, what is that? So when you're in an ideal world, your baby's positioned face back, because then the crown of their head, that's the smallest, tucks under, their chin tucks under, they can emerge out of the vagina or the birth canal. The baby's facing forward, it just might mean that the front part of the head that's a little bit bigger is coming out first, or that the baby has to do a lot more work during labor to turn to be in a more optimal position for birth. And so this is actually more common. Back labors are more common nowadays. And it's interesting that you had an active job, because my midwife was telling me that it's more common now because people sit all day. And I had gone off work at 38 weeks because I'm a physiotherapist. I was on my feet all day, and I had a really hard pregnancy. So it was exhausting. I had spotting throughout, bleeding throughout. Like it was emotionally and physically exhausting. So I was like, 38 weeks, I'm going to take off. I kept thinking she was going to be early. She didn't come till 41 weeks. And my last 3 weeks, I was bored. So I cleaned the whole home. I organized everything. And then my last couple of weeks, I was just laying on the couch watching shows and
it's
relaxing.
Like you're nesting.
I was nesting. And my midwife said, this is actually the baby's positioned in a worse position now that you've been off work, because I was sitting more. And so versus when I was on my feet, the baby was in a better position. So it is very interesting to see how birthing has changed, and more people are having C-sections and like more procedures. And I wonder if it's because we're more sedentary through our births. And you are very active. So I wonder if that helped you have a more powerful, fast labor too. This is all, we don't know what caused it, but this is all something I wonder.
Yes. And I mean, after this all went down, many nurses have told me that in their community, a lot of people have precipitous labors, what they call it, when it's really fast, because they're on their feet all day. So it is common to have really fast labors when you're on your feet, but it's not common for a first baby, because usually the first babies take longer. I've been told. So my midwife sent me home, and she said, you know what, sit tight. It'll be at least a week, maybe 2. And then at that point, we'll discuss induction or other methods. Meanwhile, we're just going to monitor you. We booked an ultrasound. We booked another appointment just to keep tabs. But she said, no, there's no, the placement is up. There's absolutely no sign that this baby's going to come. So I said, okay. Went home, told my husband, I said, yep, there's the baby's not coming. So we went out to eat some Jamaican food. Toronto has a lot of great foods. We had the Jamaican patties, the really spicy ones. And I enjoyed it, and ate a lot of like spicy Jamaican food, and we were like, oh, it's delicious. And then I think around 10 I noticed like, oh, I feel really bloated, and husband's like, yeah, me too. And I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have eaten all that. I should have maybe had a little less. Like I overate. I overdid it, which is fun when you're pregnant, because you're like, no one can tell you like, oh, you're eating too much.
No one can tell you're eating too much. Yeah.
Nope. Eating as much as I want. I mean, you should always eat as much as you want, but like it's like
especially in pregnancy.
Especially in pregnancy. So I go to bed, and then at 4 a.m. I kind of feel really constipated. Like before it was like it was not just my tummy a bit, but then at night I was like, oh man, I'm so constipated. So I elbow my husband, and I'm like, hey, I can't sleep. Like the Jamaican food really got to me. He goes, oh, me too. Let's just watch a movie. And this was Thursday. That would have been the Thursday night. So that would have been Friday morning. Like Thursday night was with the midwife. So Friday morning, we're up watching a movie. So we sit down on the couch, and everything's fine. And then suddenly I'm like, oh man, it's constipation. So I get up, I bend, I move, rock around, and then it's gone. And like, okay, let's keep watching. And then I get up after a set period of time, it happens again. I'm like, oh, this constipation's so annoying. And I'm moving and I'm bending and I'm on. And then my husband's like, wait a minute, how is it that your constipation doesn't come and go? Do you think it's a contraction? I said, no, because we went to we did two birth classes, one at the hospital. Sunnybrook Hospital had one for parents, so we did that. Our midwives were like, no, 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 it's different with midwifery, so go to this class taught by a doula. And they
Mm,
told us it's a long time, and they gave us a time frame, and they described symptoms and dilating. And I said, no, like there's no way. And also I said, it's funny because before he said that, I was like, I am such a wimp. Look at me complaining about constipation. How am I going to deal with the delivery when the time comes? Like, wow. And like here I'm telling the midwives, absolutely no medication. I want to go. I don't want an epidural. I don't want. I like, like I had my birth
your
plan, and then
birth
I'm like,
plan.
and then meanwhile I'm like, oh, this constipation is so annoying. It's like I felt like during those periods, I felt like I really needed to fart. And I was trying really hard to
Yes.
fart, but there was no pain. And I literally, the only thing I felt it was maybe the small section of my back here. I
Yeah.
would feel it there, gas, just gas. And then it would go away. But there was no pain. And my midwives did give me a booklet that said if there was lower back pain to call them immediately. But I was like, but it's not pain, it's just gas. And then so my husband was like, okay,
Mm.
we'll just call them in the morning at 9 and see what they think. And I said, okay. And but when this happened again, my husband's like, okay, no, no, no. Um, gas, constipation doesn't come and go.
Yeah. It's
We
not going to be
time,
time for a minute and then
yeah, yeah. And so he timed it, and 6 minutes between. So
wow.
it happened. Next one was 6 minutes later, and then he timed it again. It was 4 minutes, and then he timed it. So this is the third time he times it again. It's 2 minutes. But in between of him timing me, I fell asleep. Like I was like, and then I would wake up, and so like that gives you an idea of that it wasn't super painful or agonizing, and I still believed he had a feeling that no, this isn't normal. This could be contractions, and I was still in the camp of no, but it doesn't hurt. This has to be
Just
constipation.
gas
And
and
if I can,
constipation. Yeah.
and this is so annoying, if I could just go to the bathroom and get rid of this gas needs to go away. It's really bothering me. And so when he had measured the 2 minutes, I said, that's it. I've had enough. I'm going to the bathroom. I'm going to get rid of it. So I go to the bathroom, I squat, and I'm just kind of trying to push. And there's no, like the signs that we were told in our course, mucus plug, water breaking. There was none of that, none of that. And it must have happened while I was in the toilet there, because I was there. I didn't feel like it was there very long. And then suddenly, bloop, and I was like, wait a minute. Then I knew, no, something happened. And I put my hand and I could feel hair. And I was just like, oh
What?
shit, oh shit. And sorry,
That's
I shouldn't be
okay.
scared. And I step from the toilet and I look, and yes, it's bloody. And I said, oh, that's my mucus plug. But it didn't appear before, and there was no water breaking, and there was no none of the signs that I was told to look for. And at one point I did, before I went to sleep, I threw up a tiny bit, but I didn't, I thought it was because I really
Oh,
overate.
right.
I had no connection that, because apparently throwing up is a sign, can be a sign. So I didn't have anything chronologically that informed me. And by this time it was 6 a.m., a little before 6 a.m. So I go to my husband and I say, I didn't want to alarm him, because I was like in my head, I'm like, oh, I messed up. I had no idea I was in labor. So I told him, can you look between my legs? I feel something. And then he goes, oh my God, it's a head. Oh my God. No. Oh my God, I see hair. And I was like, yeah, that's what I thought. And then I was in denial because I thought I could hold it in. I was like, no, we can still go to the hospital. He's like, no, we have to call 911. You can't go anywhere. I'm like, well, what if we could go to the hospital? What if I could hold it in? He's like, you can't hold it in. And so he calls the hospital, and I wish I had the recording because it would have been hilarious, like to keep his thing. So it's like, hello, this is 911. What's the nature of your call? And my husband, my wife's having a baby. Okay. And the person is so calm because my husband had the phone on speaker. Okay, I'll transfer you to right department. And they told him, meanwhile, to get towels, string, and I think that was it, a bowl maybe, or I think that was it. And because I thread, because
Yeah.
I thread, my husband knew exactly where the string was. It's in the medicine cabinet because I use it for my
For
facial hair. So he
threading.
grabbed,
Yeah.
yeah, to thread it. So he grabs it. He had everything in 2 seconds. He had the towel, and I lie down on the couch. And then what happened during this, I'm getting what are probably, now I realize were contractions, but it's like a wave of intense, you need to just
Poop.
and it's almost like I was holding it in. So what happened was that I was feeling waves of it's hard to describe it. I must have been some kind of a contraction, but it just felt of waves of where I had a cough and I was trying to hold it in. I've been holding it in ever since I felt
The
hair.
pressure. Yeah.
I've been holding it in. I've been doing the opposite of what my body was basically like, push. And I was like, nope, nope, tensing up, trying to hold it in because in my head I could still somehow magically hold it in and go to the hospital that's 5 minutes away from us. But during one of these sensations, while I was just moving from the bathroom to the couch, I as I lied on the couch, I missed one of the feelings, like I didn't hold, and then so it was like, broop, and then my husband is on the phone still with the parent, and he's like, "Well, what do you see?" The entire head is sticking out, and the person at the dispatcher is like, "Already?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, okay, okay, tell her to push." And I was like, "I didn't push. I just stopped holding it in, and the baby flew out,
Wow.
like flew
Wow.
out." And amazingly, it wasn't a back labor. The baby's head was down on the side. It was on the side. So it must have turned around
Turned.
between, yeah, it turned between the few hours. Like it turned, it positioned, it went down in between a very, very fast. And that was it. And the paramedics came 7 minutes after he was born. Yeah. But the
Wow.
hilarious thing, the paramedics have a script they follow, I learned after. And the end of a birth script is that they ask you what's the gender. And this is another thing that I really annoyed my parents. I didn't want to know the gender. I wanted it to be a surprise because there's so few surprises in life. So I said,
Yes.
I don't want to know if it's a boy or a girl. And it annoyed everyone. Like my parents refused to hold the baby shower because they're like, well, we need to know the gender for the clothes. I was like, or you could just get gender neutral clothes because
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
And I don't care, like pink, blue, I don't care. I'll
Yeah.
put it on the baby. And they're like, no. So they delayed it. And everyone was mad. But the funny thing is I believed I was having a girl based on villager logic, like, oh, if the baby's sitting up here, it's more likely a
Yes.
girl. And my husband's cousin had a dream before I had announced the pregnancy, but I knew I was pregnant, but I was waiting until after the first trimester
Yeah.
to announce it. And she's saying, I had a dream that you had a baby, that you were having a baby girl or something. And I was like, oh, that must be, maybe it's a
It's
sign,
a
I don't know.
sign. Yeah.
And everyone had opinions like based on the shape and size of my belly. So I just kind of convinced myself I was having a girl. So the odd thing was like, so when I asked my husband, is it a boy or a girl? He checks and then he goes, it's a boy. And I was like, what? And it's like, so I wish we had the recording where I was just like, really? What? I thought I was having a girl.
I was convinced I was having a girl.
Yeah. And then my husband's like, why are you more surprised about that than all this whole like
Than the fact that you just had a baby? Like, oh my gosh, can we just take a step back and just, wow. Like this is, first of all, I'm so incredibly amazed at the human body and that
Yeah.
your body literally just did what it was supposed to without intervention, without working hard. And this is, I really think it's an important story to share because we have it in our heads that it's going to be so painful, that it's going to be a certain way, that because the baby's up here, you maybe need to be induced because, oh, it's not going to come. But you just showed that it can come, the baby can come whenever they want, whenever your body's ready. And it can happen like that, or it can happen over 3 days. And I love that you and your husband were so, like, it seemed like you were really calm through it all, despite what was
Yes.
happening.
Props to my husband because I genuinely thought I could hold it in and go to the hospital. And he was the one I was like, no, we're not going anywhere. I'm going to call 911. If we had known everything was okay, we would have called the midwives. But at the time, we were just so confused and we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know if everything would be okay. The baby was really quiet. And we're like, is that normal? Is it okay? Like I kept, it's interesting because physically it
Yeah.
was more straightforward than psychologically. So afterwards I had a
Ah.
lot of guilt for not being in the hospital and not I thought I messed up. Like I thought I made a mistake and I thought that he was hurt because of that, but it didn't. Like everything was fine. And people told me afterwards, babies don't come that fast. Usually if there's an issue or if there's anatomy, then they get stuck. They never come that fast unless it's straightforward.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
and
Precipitous
props
precipitous births are like, and even the sign of throwing up, oftentimes when you throw up, it's going to be a faster birth, apparently. Just because your body's like, evacuate, let's go, let's get it all out.
Yeah.
And if your body's not meant to handle it, it wouldn't happen, kind of thing too, right? Like it's a series of things. But I'm curious, what was the post birth like? How did you birth the placenta, and what happened, in
So
that phase?
So what's interesting is I had discussed all this with my midwives and the birth plan and everything, and I had my bags packed and clear, labeled so my husband would know what's what. Like everything was clear. I packed it, a bag if I needed a cesarean, a bag if I didn't, a bag if, and like I just had everything planned, and it was hilarious because nothing went according to plan. And so when the paramedics came, and my husband, like again, props to my husband for being very calm, and I think a lot of men would have freaked out in this situation. I
Yes,
think a lot of men
100%. Yeah.
would remain calm, and he was very calm, and I did feel comfortable, and I think that also contributed to just having things go
Happens
my
smoothly.
body. Once
Yeah.
I stopped holding it in, everything was just like fell into place perfectly. So the paramedics told him to, you know, put the baby on my lap, and we kind of had our blankets, and we had that all ready anyways because we were good. I had it for the hospital, so we just took it, wiped him very quickly, and put the blanket on. We didn't clean him because I wanted that. I
For
wanted
next
all
thing.
that, you
Yeah.
know, like we discussed it with the midwife, so I didn't clean him and I didn't want him washed. So we just wrapped him with the blanket to make sure he was warm, because we're like, and put him on my chest to make sure he was warm, because you know, we're not medical professionals, so we're just kind of, and about 7 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes later, there's a knock at our door. A door was open, but there was still a knock because we left it open for them. And this huge, my husband describes him as 7 feet tall, 7 foot wide guy comes and was like, "Is everything okay?" in a big voice. My husband's like, "Why did they send Mr. Delicate here for the baby?" And then he, when we said yes, he goes, "Clear." And then the paramedics ran in with the gurney and everything. So it turned out it was a fire department in the event we needed oxygen, because the paramedics didn't have, I guess if there's a baby, they send in the paramedics and the firefighters, and the
Oh,
firefighters are there if they need oxygen. They need to administer oxygen. So now I understood. But at the time we saw this ginormous person, not to say that they, you know, can't
they're
deal
all
with
big.
babies,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but we
Yeah.
were just surprised. We're like, what's going on? And also like I was pretty much like it felt like a dream. Everything that was going on felt like a dream. So they came in, and we, on the line, they were telling us, "I think you'll have to cut the cord without, because it's been like 7 minutes." They're like, "Oh, it's getting long. Maybe you'll have to cut it." We're like, "No, let's wait a bit longer." And then when the paramedics came, they cut it, but they cut it like super long. So they cut the cord. They let my husband cut the cord because he wanted to cut it. So he cut it, and then this is the weird part is, they're like, "Okay, we have to take you straight to the hospital." So they didn't let me get dressed. I'm not wearing anything. I took off my clothes. So I'm not wearing anything. And they literally, I took the bed sheet that was on the couch, they wrapped it around me like a toga, and they just put me on the gurney with the baby and took me like that. So I had no wallet, no phone, no ID, none of my bags, none of my hospital gear. They just took me straight to the ambulance because they're like, "We need to get you to hospital right now." And I was like, "What, wait, what? Can I get my phone?" No. I was like, "Okay, okay." So all I had was me and the baby, and my husband, for just what he did is, we have this new car now, so he immediately followed the ambulance. So it was cool because I could see through the window. I could see him running red lights, following the ambulance with the car just behind me. And I'm like, "I hope you brought my bags because I don't have anything."
Yeah.
And then it was a bit of a shock because it was a bit of an unintentional transfer of care from midwives to the
Mm.
hospital system. So immediately when I was in the hospital system, they said, "We need to be able to admit you. We're going to have to bill it as if the birth happened here because we can't give you postpartum care." And I felt bad because I'm like, "But the midwives are like what
They
about
took care of me the
they
entire
took care
time.
of me, and now
Yeah.
you're billing it." But okay. And then when I went in, my husband somehow found where I was, and the paramedics were like, "It's a good thing you delivered the baby because we are trained to deliver it. We don't like to. It makes us nervous." And I was like, "How do you think we feel? We have zero medical. We're not medical professionals. At least you guys have training."
I
We had
know.
no idea. Oh, and I didn't mention the string. You know what the string was for? Because we're like, string. It's to tie the umbilical cord as a clamp instead of a clamp. So
Mm.
that's
So
what
you
it's
just
for.
tied the clamp. Oh, yeah. So
Yeah. So
after
they,
cutting it, you kind of tied, or you cut it and
yeah,
you tied
no,
the knot and then cut
we
it.
tied the knot and then cut it. But so, because at first we're like, string, what?
Yeah. Yeah. And
um,
so when you birthed the placenta, you were just at home still, not in the hospital.
no, this is the issue is I had no time for anything because as soon, it was not long after I'd given birth and we dropped it that the paramedics took me, and I could feel like something was happening. And they asked me, they said, while I'm in the ambulance, they said, did you birth the placenta yet? I said, no, not yet. They're like, oh, we're not equipped to deal with a placenta in the ambulance. So can you hold it? And I was like, I'll try. So I sat there and I was doing the same thing I was doing before. I was like clenching my body and trying, like I could feel sensations that are like out, and
trying to evacuate.
Yeah, and I clenched it. And then when I got into the hospital, they said they it was amazing. Like I never got out of the gurney, so they managed to wheel me straight into the
room,
through an emergency, right into the birthing room. And so I didn't see any registration desk. I didn't see any paperwork. I was just magically into the birth room, which I thought was interesting. And they're pretty much, the nurse was like, okay, here's a shot of oxytocin to get the placenta out. And it's one of those things where I'm not complaining, I'm grateful, but I had discussed with my midwives, I wanted to do expected management. I wanted to wait for the placenta. And of course, like I wouldn't be discharged with bits of placenta, then you get infected and it's a medical emergency. But I knew like I wanted to wait and see if it would come out on its own. And it's one of those things where I didn't get, like I was disappointed that it was pretty much, here's a shot. And it's like midwives, they ask you everything.
I know.
And that's why like there was no way I could not have a midwife.
Yeah.
And then when they did it, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to the washroom because I haven't washed myself. I haven't done anything. I'm naked. I'm like, I finally had a hospital gown, so I was finally clothed. And then they're like, what, are you crazy woman? You can't get up. You can't do this. I was like, really? Like, I feel fine. Like, okay. Okay. And
it's
then
so different at the hospital and with the OB nurse. Yeah.
And then I, not to criticize them, but this particular nurse, what happened was, so they gave the oxytocin, and then the sensation I had for the placenta, it disappeared. And then the OB, I don't know why, there's no logic, I don't know what's going on, but the OBG, there's a resident that came in and she's like, I'm qualified, I know I'm a resident, but I'm qualified, I'm a student, but I'm qualified. I'm like, I'm not worried, it's okay, whatever, do what you need to do. So she pulled it out and it came out in bits, like it came out kind of, because she kind of grabbed part of it and it came out. And then it was in a tray, the torn up placenta. And I said, oh, interesting. Like, I'd like to look at it. And then the nurse was like, do you want to eat it? I said, what? Pardon me? She's like, that's what you people do. And I'm like, you people?
Excuse me?
Yeah. And I was so like, what, people who see midwives? I don't want to, I'm not a hippie. I'm educated. I have an engineering degree, a science degree. Like, I was so like, this is why I wanted a midwife, because I don't want to be shamed. Like, I didn't even like, I just said like, pardon me, like because I didn't say anything.
It's fascinating to look at your own placenta because your body made that.
Yeah, and
why would you not want to look at it?
I'm not.
And even if you did want to eat it, that's fine. That some culture that might be normal, but like, I'm sorry you had that happen. That is so inappropriate. And like, this is what I want people to understand is this is Sunnybrook Hospital, which is a major Toronto hospital. I used to treat somebody who was a labor and delivery nurse at Sunnybrook, and she told me the intervention rate at that time was 97%.
Oh, wow.
So this is why you have a hospital birth. You are more than likely going to have interventions, whether you want it or not, right? Some people go in, they're like, I don't want anything. And then I'm like, yeah, but unfortunately you're in their hands now. You're in their hands and they can inject oxytocin without your permission, not even consent. Like it's I'm sorry you had to have that.
And I also
especially
understand,
after you're like full home birth.
Yeah, that part felt more calm actually. And I did see the contrast between clinical setting and home setting. And like I understand why they need to clear the birth room. They need to get people in fast. So I'm assuming that's why they need to just they
want you in and out. They don't want you to just stay there.
They don't have the resources for me to sit there and wait for my placenta to birth. Okay, I'm not mad at them, but it's just an observation of the differences.
I think it's important to share so that people who are listening, who maybe work in a hospital, they can elevate their care because it's client-centered first. Yeah, I don't care about finances and billing.
And if you have to do something, fine, but don't be like you people, because I felt a bit like I felt like I was being judged, and I was like and then in the back of my mind, this is a bit of an aside, I asked my friend who was also seeing a midwife at a different clinic, but she'd also had midwife births. I said, has it ever happened that someone missed their labor? And she's like, oh, never. Like there was one lady in the clinic at one point, but she had serious mental health issues. So I was already feeling guilty. And she didn't know this would happen. And she didn't mean anything, but she was just saying, oh, no, your body will tell you, you'll know, you will always know when you're in labor. I was just asking because I'd never been in labor and I didn't really know what to look for. And so that kind of put a bit of guilt in my head. And then you people comment, it just triggered something that I kind of went into a bit of a like depression because I was like, is this my
Yeah.
fault? Did I mess
Yeah.
up? Like, and until the baby hadn't been all checked, so I didn't know that, okay, everything was fine. But I was like, oh,
Right.
did I mess up? Did I hurt him? Is everything okay? When he came out of, he had like big Kim Kardashian lips, like this. And I was like, oh wow, but I mean, babies are not beautiful out of like I mean, they're beautiful, but they're
They're
not their
beautiful, but they're
best.
kind of like wrinkly
Yeah.
and,
When I do portraits for parents, I say, let's wait until 3 months, not earlier, because it won't look like them. And they're not like, so give them time to settle in and then
yeah.
I'll draw them, because otherwise you'll be disappointed with the results if I do it. Like, I have to explain that because sometimes I get like newborn, draw this. And I'm like, you don't want me to draw that. You will not be happy with the results. So wait a few
Yeah.
months. 4 months is a good time to, but then the resident came and she said, wow, like you are tough. And I was so happy. I was like, yeah, I am tough. I am so tough. Thank you for acknowledging. And she said, okay, um, very like you have very minor tears for such a fast birth. It would have healed by itself, but since I'm gonna fix it up. So she went ahead and did like a few stitches. But I was like, in my head, I'm like, but wait, if it would heal on its own, do you have? But I was like, whatever. Like, no one was
Because they can
asking me.
bill.
Yeah, I guess so. Because I was like, it's so
Yeah.
weird. Like, if you don't need to, but I mean, like, I'm also like, okay, I know, like, that's why again, midwife. It's like I can ask about everything because I'm like, if I'm not one to dispute any medical care, but it's like if it's gonna heal on its own, I'd rather it heal on its own. It's
Hmm.
just me. That's my
Hmm.
personality. So I
Yeah.
was kind of like, oh, okay. But she was very sweet, so I had no like. I was like, okay, thank you. And then the supervising, when my husband came in, my husband didn't hear the comment of you people because he came in a little after. Um, the uh, the supervising OBGYN was like, hey, yo, high five. If you ever want to come here and deliver babies, good job. And I'm like, where's my good job? Look. And I was like, oh well, like I should just like focus on the baby, whatever. Maybe it's hormones or something. But that was like the start of something that I noticed afterwards. But
Yeah.
once I got transferred, like I was in the birth room for maybe 15 minutes, seriously, because there was nothing to be done. So they wheeled me over to a room with another family where, I'm kind of recovering.
Recovering. Yeah.
Yes. And then again, they're like, here's your pain meds. And I'm like, okay, yeah, there's no discussion about what it is, but like no one's asking me, like, do you want to take these? But I'm like, okay, I mean, there's no one's asking me, so I guess I have to take them. There was a nurse there that was like, the nurses there were all fantastic. Like I adored them. So my experience became more positive after that one interaction with the nurse. All the other nurses at Sunnybrook were fabulous. There was one that spoke Egyptian. She's a nurse from the Philippines. She spoke
Amazing.
Arabic with an Egyptian accent. I felt so welcome. I'm like, how? She's like, oh, I used to work at Saudi, and a lot of the doctors there were Egyptians. And I'm like, amazing.
Wow.
Wow. And so like, I
Just
don't
makes
want
you
to
feel
paint.
like home, like it's like a home
It
kind of
is. It
welcoming. Yeah.
is. Yeah. Yeah. And she's the one that told me that these really fast births are really common with people, healthcare professionals, people in
Yes.
nursing, people who are on their feet all the time because it just makes it more likely that it'll be fast. And the midwives later told me that I had a strong genetic predisposition because of the hip. My hip to waist ratio was such that I would have a fast labor. And my mom had not the same, I was born 2 months premature, but I came really quickly. She
Mm.
went to her OBGYN and she dismissed her symptoms because it's like 2 months earlier. And I also think back in my mind, it's like, you're a brown person. What do you know? You're an immigrant. What do you
For
know?
sure.
She,
For
she
sure.
went, she went she went straight to the hospital because she's like, no, I know it's coming. And I came, they gave all the drugs to try to keep me, because two
And
months they were worried,
yeah.
but I came very fast. So again, it's like, it's possibly a genetic thing. And I want people not to feel like, I did train a lot and I did specifically look up exercises that facilitate labor, but I don't want people to feel like, oh, I earned it because I'm so active and I worked hard. I'm like, no, there's a genetic component and I got lucky. There are Olympic level athletes who need C-sections. I think it's like, it's
Yes.
anatomy. You don't have control, right? If you're a
Yeah.
tiny woman and your baby's 10 pounds, it's like, my
Yeah.
baby was not big. It was 6 pounds, 7 ounces for a
Yeah.
boy that's small. So
Yeah.
that's another reason why it was fast. If it was a big baby, I highly doubt that it would have ever been anywhere near that fast. So I want to just put it out
And
there that
I think that's important also because I know two other people who've had precipitous births who they're my friends and colleagues. And it's interesting because they're both in healthcare. One's a massage therapist on her feet all day. One's a physio on her feet all day. They both had precipitous births. One ended up going to the hospital and was terrified. And it was really painful for her. So it was a different experience. And she tore a lot because I think it was just totally different than the other. Stayed at home, had a home birth. I think it was like an 8.5, 9 pound baby, but she's also a bigger, not like a bigger person, but again, that hip, that pelvis, if it's bigger relative to everything else. Like I have a narrow pelvis that I didn't have a fast birth. It was slow, but I still had a home birth. So it's just a different experience. And I think that it's important to recognize that your body will not make you do things that it's not able to do. It's like your body could handle that. And it's really, the medical system is taught that they need to intervene with births, that it's an abnormal thing, that they need to give injections, that they need to do interventions, they need to stitch you up. And I was given the option after my first birth because I didn't really tear. I had a mild labial graze. And the midwife said, you know what, I could add a stitch or two, but, and she's like, this is what would happen if I added a stitch. In the short term, you would heal better, but in the long term, it would be fine. If I didn't add a stitch, it would take a little bit longer for it to heal, but you'd be less likely to end up with scar tissue. And I said, I'll let it heal on its own.
I love having the
informed
consent with the options, and you're educated every step of the way. It's not like I'm making the decision without knowing what the risks are. Yeah, so I love that about midwifery. It's very patient centered, and again, like each need their comfort level. I have some friends in the medical, they're doctors, and they know they're a bit biased towards all the problems that can happen, like and so they're more paranoid, and they need an OBGYN, and they're telling me like, I know doctors are qualified, but I don't want any doctor, I want someone specialized. And I'm like, yeah, you need to do you and what you're comfortable
whatever
with.
You're comfortable with.
This is my preference, but I may, if I had risk factors, if there were other things, maybe it'd be different. But even then, I know people who had midwives, still had cesareans. They're trained for transfer of care. They're trained to be like I tell everyone, they're an integrated part of the healthcare system. And that's why Canada, we're really blessed because it's not a separate, like it's part of it. So if you need transfer of care, they don't want to deliver breech babies, and they're very educated to recognize the signs of their practice, and everyone has their expertise. And it's wonderful that I think it's better when people refer to each other.
I agree.
And I think in some countries, like my friend gave birth in Norway, there's a midwifery floor and then there's an OBGYN floor, and all low risk people see the midwife and higher risk people see the OBGYN. And there's like, and I'm
that's
like,
how it is in the UK.
And it makes sense in a public healthcare system. You want to save the money. And it doesn't mean like the OBGYNs are paid less. Actually, they just have more time to focus on the riskier cases and the problematic. And I mean, they're amazing because they deal with like a lot of life and death.
Life-threatening situations.
Yeah. So I'm not at all saying like, oh, downplaying one or the other. I'm just saying that if you wanted to save money in a public health system, it's more efficient that low risk people see midwives.
Agreed.
And then of course they're trained to refer, and it's great when it's in the same hospital. It's fast, like there's no issues. So I feel like, again, it's like integrated healthcare system is the way to go because everyone has their area of expertise and work together, because the goal is not like to bill you or not bill you. It's to have good patient outcomes.
And I mean, that should be the goal, but unfortunately it is not always the goal. Yeah. And I do think that I love the idea of a separate floor, or even just having a designated midwife space, because I know a lot of midwives feel like they're in the obese turf. So they have privileges at the hospital, but they're not necessarily like welcome in the same way. And it depends on where, but I know that this is an issue because I've heard anyways in the UK that everybody gets midwife unless you're high risk. If you want to pay for if you want an OB, you have to pay for it.
Oh, wow.
Which is, I think, actually better, because then you learn to understand that birth is a normal process for most people, that is low risk for most people. And if you need to transfer care, you always have an OB there ready to go. It's more collaborative. In Canada, I do think that it is collaborative, but we have a ways to go into making it really patient-centered in terms of like, client outcomes and stuff.
I agree.
So when did you get to go home?
Well, this is the thing, is everything was fine. They were checking my son's blood because he was right at the limit of, being a smaller baby. He's right at the limit of where they would check your blood work to make sure the sugar levels, and with breastfeeding, because I was breastfeeding, that he was getting enough. So they poked and prodded at him. So I was there technically only I didn't really need to be there very long. Like by a day, I could have left. But then there was a snowstorm out of nowhere,
Mhm.
and
In April?
they
Oh, I know exactly which day that was. My friend
yes,
had a baby
yes.
shower that day, and I drove to Hamilton for this baby shower. That was a brutal snowstorm. It was icy too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so they
Oh,
actually said, you know what, we were busy last week, but this week it's not busy, so stay. We don't want you to go home in the snowstorm. And it was a blessing in disguise because we got to learn a lot of the baby stuff from the nurses. And amazing shout out to Kensington Midwives. They came, even though they couldn't bill anything, I felt bad about that, but they came unpaid and saw me, like my midwife came and saw me and assessed
wow.
me in the hospital, looked after my baby, did her own signs while the hospital did their thing. So I
Got
got like a
double.
lot of I got double and I felt bad. I was like, I wish I could give you this billing like and it's funny because my again my like in the Egyptian community, they're like, oh, the midwives are going to try to do it even if they shouldn't because they want to just bill it. And I'm like, nope, that's
No,
not my
they are
experience.
definitely not. No,
And they came to me and when they, couldn't bill it. So that's pretty amazing. Like
I think
I
that's
don't
awesome.
expect anyone to work for free ever. So I have to say like a shout out to the care. The level of care you get is really great and it's tailored to your needs. And they listen to you. Like even though I was like, I don't want a home birth. I don't want a home birth. And they kind of like, you can do a home birth. Everything's fine. They listened to me. They didn't impose anything. And now in retrospect, looking back, I have my opinions on home births changed because I kind of had a home birth
You had a home birth.
unexpectedly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did have a home birth in the end. So yeah, the treatment I got, so I stayed an extra few days. I think I stayed over the weekend even. So I came in, I guess, Friday morning and I stayed, and I think it was by the end of the Sunday that I went back. The I did all the breastfeeding classes there.
Oh, that's
I
nice.
heard other moms and their birth stories, and moms are way too hard on herself. There's one mom that was like in labor for more than 24 hours, and she's like, oh, "I'm such a wimp. I went and got an epidural." I'm like, "Dude, I don't even know how long I was in labor, but like you can't compare yourself
No.
to other people. There's nothing wrong. These are tools. I would never say you should suffer. I just wanted to feel labor personally, but it doesn't make me like better
Hmm.
or tougher. Like there's no like people should use the tools at their disposal and whatever makes you more comfortable. For me, the idea of not being able to move terrified me. So
Same.
I was like,
Yeah.
no, I need to be able to move. And frankly, like I think I had an easy labor. I was moving the whole time and I didn't realize, but I was putting, when I was, oh, I'm constipated doing this, that was how the baby was getting into the,
Further and
ideal.
further down.
Yes,
Yeah.
but of course, I didn't know that's what was happening, but it's like the body knew it didn't even need my input. The body it's like programmed. It knows exactly what to do. And it didn't need, in my case, it didn't need things.
Excess intervention. Yeah.
And frankly, I didn't feel any pain, which again is extreme. Like, I don't want to say like, but I didn't feel anything that like, it was fine. Like, it was great. I didn't need epidural. I didn't need any medication. I didn't need anything. Like I just needed to be able to move. So it worked out. But anyways, I was just saying moms are way too tough on themselves. They're like, oh, and I failed. I'm like, no, you have your baby.
No.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
you are amazing. And again, like everyone had like the charts with who delivered the baby and everyone's asking who delivered the baby. And this started a bit of a saga because when I was discharged, so Sunnybrook billed it as they delivered the baby, but there's no attending physician. And my husband was like, I want to be on the birth certificate as I want to deliver the baby. So he wrote when we did the online submission, he put his name, and then it took 6 months to get the kid's birth certificate because I kept calling them. They're like, oh, there's no attending physician or midwife or anything. I'm like, yes, because it was born at home. Yeah, but what's the attending physician? There was no attending physician. And I tried to explain it to them. And then this department referred me to that department. And then they referred me back to where I started. And it's like they didn't have
They didn't have a
anywhere,
system.
they
Yeah.
didn't have a
Because it's
system.
so
So,
rare, right? It's probably so rare.
yeah.
Either that or they need to make a system because even on my like I was annoyed that on their birth certificate, it didn't say like birthing place, home, right? Like it says like
Yeah, it's
it
true.
has to have like a hospital or like a city. And I'm like, I think it's amazing that they were both born at home. Like I want
Yeah.
to put that on there, but there's no
Yeah.
option. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think also they took forever to get their health cards because they had home births. And I had for both of them, I had to go in and like get it because I just wasn't getting it past that. Like, you know how you have the 3 months where you get
Yeah.
the temp? I didn't get
Exactly.
it. And I was like 6 months
Exactly.
for my second one. It was during the pandemic, but even still. And the other thing, what you were talking about too, is I have another friend who I worked with who had a very similar labor to yours, They were laughing, they were eating, she's like, I had a bit of gas, but I didn't think it was labor. So like, then we went to the hospital. It wasn't a precipitous birth though, but it was a very mild in terms of pain. There was no pain. She said they were laughing, they were watching a show. And I said, people need to hear those stories, because when we are programmed to believe that it is going to be painful, that it is going to be this and it's going to be that, our bodies start to expect that almost. And when we start to hear stories like this, we say, oh, why can't my body, why couldn't that happen to me? It doesn't have to be the speed, but even just that sensation of, it's not painful. Now for both of mine, I would say were definitely intense. My first, there were definitely points where I would say it was painful, but I didn't like to use the word pain because I found that was very negative. So I just kept using the word intense. It was very intense.
Yeah. And it's always going to be intense.
It's always going to be intense, but
human being.
Exactly. And I just kept thinking like, this is normal, right? Like this is how it's going to be. And I feel like it's a privilege to be able to experience that in any state. So you are amazing. And I think you are incredible and strong. And what a beautiful also moment for you and your husband to be
it's really
be
special.
ones. What a special time. Like that's a bond, that's a big bond.
And also I love that my body was like, I fell asleep between contractions. Like, it's great. It's like, you need to rest a bit. Here you go. And
you're like,
that's a superpower, being able to sleep anywhere.
So tell me about what it was like postpartum. You mentioned your mental health obviously suffered a little bit with those immediate experiences being, your people. Like, I can't believe people would say that, because you're like, are you talking about me because I saw a midwife or my race, my people? Like, why are you attacking me right now? I just came here and I just had a baby. Like,
and it's I'm like, did they think like I was ignoring it and purposely like just being like, I'm not like that it felt a lot of like, it put a lot of like shame on you kind of feeling, and
shame on you for not coming here before.
And so it kind of, I was very uncomfortable with it, but otherwise my experience was good with the other
professionals, nurses,
with the other professionals. And once I was discharged, it wasn't even in less than a week, the midwives were in the apartment checking on the kid, weighing the kid.
So that's good to know. The midwife is doing the post-birth care still.
They did everything. So I just feel bad because they didn't get the birth, which I assume would be the biggest, like they didn't get it. But they still came and they still did everything. And I got like I got both. Like I got the hospital care, I got the midwifery care. They came to my house. Another one was, and I know this might be kind of unpopular with people, but co-sleeping is, the doctors were like, you absolutely cannot co-sleep. Even in the clinic, when you're asleep this is in the hospital, the baby has to be in the bassinet while you're asleep. Well, guess what? I put it in the bassinet, screaming. So I kept him on me, and I was, and at home, like we are so sleep deprived and we're not getting any sleep. And then finally but the midwives on the other hand were like, no, co-sleeping is fine. You're not smoking. You're not there. These are the risk factors. Here's how we can make it safer. Here's a breastfeeding position for while you're sleeping. And that was the only way I got any sleep. And I know like my doctor would 100% be against that. And I don't have any opinions, but for us, it worked. Like for us, it worked. We got through the night. This will be strange, but what I found hard was I had initially a lot of guilt because I felt better when I realized everything was okay. The nurse was making fun of, they asked my husband to cut it again because the paramedics had cut it way too long, and he's like, oh, those paramedics. They called it, he gave baby a tail. Look, what is this? Like, and so Daddy, come here. And it got my husband back, cut it again. We're going to do it again. We're going to do much closer because, they're being cautious. I guess the nurse thought it was hilarious and ridiculous. So they cut the cord twice.
So long.
Yeah, it was that long. Yeah. I guess that's why they're not comfortable delivering, even though they can do it.
They probably do it so infrequently that they just don't have the experience, right? It's like anything, lack of practice.
Yeah.
And yeah. So tell me about that, because now you are home with the baby. And I never would have thought that you would have felt guilt around it. So thank you for sharing that, because that's something I had never considered, is feeling like you did something. I don't see anything wrong or nothing, right? It's just how your body did it.
The midwives were great at reassuring me this happens, precipitous labor happened. One midwife was like, sometimes I feel like I'm not doing anything. Like the body just does everything. So it's fine. Like sometimes the baby just falls out. Like it's, and you catch the baby, and that's what you do as an OBGYN or as a midwife. Sometimes that's what it is. Like it's not always intervention. And then she's like, you know, you have that genetic thing, it's fast, it's okay. Like, because I was like, oh no, I could have, something bad could have happened, or you know, the baby's not okay. No, the baby's fine, it was okay. And like, I didn't, how would I have known? Like, how would I have known that the gas, it didn't fit. I did 2 different classes. Neither of them were seen. My husband didn't see it. We didn't see it. So that's it. Like, there's no shame in it. Thankfully,
I never would have called it gas for my birth. Let me tell you, it was definitely a major contraction. So again, that goes to show that why, and that's for me too, is educating people on, you know, that it could just be really like gas or more mild. It doesn't always come where it's a rhythmic, you know, gradual progression, even though that might be the average or the more common thing. Exactly. It's not always the case. So thank you.
And hilariously,
important points.
Don't do this. But I was Googling why because when my husband was saying maybe, but why does a gas pain doesn't come and go? I was Googling, can you mistake gas pain for constipation? No. Okay, we're fine. But obviously don't Google medical symptoms. Talk to your doctor. Like that's the moral of the story, because the Google was wrong. you can in some cases confuse gas pain for labor, gas yeah, exactly. So everyone's different, but the midwives were very good at like helping with the mental health aspect, and you know, they visited us twice, and then after that we went to their clinic for the assessment. The baby was fine, everything was good. So it was very positive. What was interesting is 4 weeks after, I was like, because I'm, you know, very active, I returned to exercise very lightly, and the bleeding, there was no bleeding, there was nothing. And then the bleeding came back. Like there was some bleeding, of course, immediately after birth, but it was very fast and it didn't last very long. And then suddenly I had spotting, and my midwife was like, what did you do? Oh, I think you need to dial it back. I was like, really? But I didn't do anything. She's like, you went through a birth. Even if it's like straightforward, it's still trauma for your body. So listen to your body. She's like, we can also do an ultrasound if you want to be sure, but I think it's just the activity. The return to activity was too soon. So I listened to her and I stopped, and then the bleeding went away. And I was like, oh, wow, like this, it's humbling, because even if you have the most straightforward birth, it's still a recovery process.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Mom Strength and being part of this important conversation. Check out the show notes for more info and links, and we'll chat again real soon.